Okay, perfect. So today we're back, and I do have a special guest producer of the She Was Here, Heather O'Rourke documentary, Brian Pockris. Am I saying your name right?
It's actually Pokras, but it's okay.
Okay,
Yeah,
perfect. And
that,
thank you so much for coming on.
yeah, no problem. I'm happy to be here.
I think initially people had reached out to you when NT Lawyer's identity was exposed.
Yeah, the rumor that kind of started on Crazy Days and Nights back in 2017 is one that just kind of for some reason got some legs and just was able to kind of circulate and just created a rumor about Heather that somehow the internet really jumped on. And of course, while we were filming the documentary and telling Heather's story, because I mean, the documentary itself is not about rumors or anything. It's really just a sweet telling of Heather's life and something that's never been done before. Just something that really kind of tells her life from birth to death, and then touching upon what's happened after her passing. And I think that's really what we set out to do, kind of like a love letter to Heather and her family. And also, but the thing is, of course, while we were doing it, this rumor is something that's kind of happened in those 35 years since her passing. And her legacy gets kind of tarnished by some of these things like what happened here with NT and Crazy Days and Nights. So of course we always wanted to, ideally we were wanted to maybe interview him while we were making it, or to kind of at least address it that way. But he, of course, we tried, he dodged. And then of course when he got revealed, we were reached out to.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, well, first off, I love the idea of just making like a true autobiography. Those are my favorite kinds of movies. But the fact that I think this is where this rumor originated was from him. At least it seems that way from what I can tell on the internet. A lot of things have been removed, but they're also archived. I've found stuff everywhere from Reddit to TikTok to YouTube. There is this really dark side of conspiracy theories. And I'm glad that today we can kind of uncover some of the truth behind these conspiracies and dispel some of the horrible things that have been said and the rumors surrounding her death, all of it.
Yeah, I think also an understanding of why these come out and why people will jump onto it. I'm always a big why person, like kind of trying to see why someone would make something up and why they wouldn't, or why someone would read something and immediately believe it to be true. And at least what we did, I mean, during this documentary, we worked alongside the O'Rourke family and really we got to go through Heather's things and got access to a lot of things that the public does not have access to. So we really wanted to tell her story truthfully and honestly. Kind of makes you wonder sometimes why Heather is such an interest for these conspiracy theory people, why her name comes up. And I think we'll jump into why, and I can at least give my opinion. And of course, any questions you have, nothing that I say is going to be hearsay. It's everything that, is based on my hours and hours of research and my knowledge with the family and with my producing partner, Nick Bailey. The two of us kind of got really close with the family, and our goal is to really tell her story truthfully as it was. And we even told the family that if we do come across anything, we have a duty to share it. And they understood, and they're like, yeah, we trust you guys, and
Wow.
we get your role.
And so truly, you guys were even open to finding something.
Yeah, because with documentaries, you never know what you're going. That's why it's like the reason why this has taken a few years is because it's not like a normal film that you have a script and you start and then you finish. They're kind of like living, breathing creatures as things come out as it's going. You kind of discover things, and then also when you're discovering the person, you're also got that producer hat on it because you have to make something that's marketable and that's going to be appealable to not just Heather fans but to everybody. So it's a big challenge.
Definitely. And well, I think that a part of why her story is so legendary, or it's become an urban legend, is because of just all of the urban legends surrounding Poltergeist, the franchise in general, right?
Yeah, because you got the poltergeist curse stuff, and you get it. It's part of the nature of the beast. When you're dealing with any horror movie, that kind of like to sell tickets and to sell DVDs, they always like to talk about things like the poltergeist curse or things with the Exorcist and all this stuff that happened during filming. And the poltergeist curse stuff is never really bothered the family because if we all understand it's kind of just nonsense and it's just to sell tickets. It's just basically with poltergeist curse. I mean, there were two coincidental tragedies that happened that had nothing to do with the fact that the girls starred in a movie. I mean, it's not like they were killed on the set or anything happened.
No, and it was like a truly horrific domestic violence situation.
Dominic Dunn, yeah. And yeah,
Mhm.
and then like, the guy in Poltergeist 2, he had terminal cancer while he was filming it. So the fact that he died before the movie came out is I mean, the guy was sick.
Yeah,
And
he knew he was going to pass away. So
yeah, and it's like, so I mean, so those type of things, just when it talks about like the human aspects, of course we're trying to just humanize Heather because people just like to think of her as just this little 5-year-old girl, this innocent little big blue-eyed blonde-haired little kid, and who's just like a victim of everything. And that's just kind of what people like to paint her as. And what people don't realize that she lived to about 12 years old. She was almost a teenager. So I mean, it's not like she was 5 years old.
she was mostly known for her iconic role in Poltergeist. I mean, she did work a lot though. She was in Happy Days. She was in a
Yeah.
lot of things. Like you said, there's a lot of like what society wants to project onto her and her story. But the problem is, and this happens a lot, but I think it's not to bring it back to Aaron Carter, but it's kind of like a perfect storm because you have this like blonde hair, blue eyed, angelic child who is literally 12 going on 30 and can really truly act and is very talented and well mannered. And she passes away tragically. And also, there's the poltergeist curse. And also, there's this rise of conspiracy theories and Hollywood and child sacrifice and Steven Spielberg, just this kind of anti Semitic push in conspiracy realms on and forums on the internet. And so I do think it's kind of like a perfect storm and like a breeding ground. And Heather just happens to be one of the victims that fell into that kind of like conspiracy trauma porn, true crime porn trap.
Yeah, totally. And the irony of her death, because it's kind of like with Paul Walker, how, he stars in all those Fast and the Furious movies, and then he ends up getting killed in a car crash in a fancy car. I mean, with Heather, she stars in movies where, in essence, death is after her, and then death gets her, and she dies young. So it's kind of, I think there's definitely an interest in there because it's of the irony. And like you were saying, I mean, she worked with a lot of big people, but, the thing that people don't seem to realize the truth, the fact that, Heather was very lucky, and the fact that she worked with some very great people who were so kind to her. Every set that she was on, she was not around one of those bad guys. And people just want to paint Spielberg as bad just because, I don't know, because he's the biggest guy in Hollywood, or like you were saying, maybe because of his religion or whatever it is. I mean, Spielberg's never had any allegations about anything inappropriate. And I can tell you, at least from what I've read, I mean, he was so kind to her. And even up until the very end, and just there was nothing, there's not even circumstantial evidence that links any bit of Hollywood abuse, especially from Spielberg. It's just kind of, people are just making it up.
It's bizarre. Yeah. Oh, and I do know, I forgot she was in a TV movie with River Phoenix.
Yeah, she did it was a movie called Surviving. It was kind of this one of those TV movies back in like 1985. It was about suicide, and it was like with Molly Ringwald and Zach Galligan, the guy from Gremlins. And it was a pretty heavy piece, but it's just kind of ironic that her and River Phoenix were brother and sister in that.
That is crazy. But yeah, she really was magnetic. When I Google her, it doesn't take much searching for her on the internet to come up with articles like mysterious death of 80s child star, Hollywood curse surrounding it. But it gets as dark as like I see, I hate to even read these things because it's so horrific that any adult would come up with these types of things and then put them out into the world with the intention of making money too.
Exactly. People don't realize how there was a person. She's got a family out here, and they really are just making it up. And it's this kind of snowball effect, like you're saying, because the real thing that with Heather's legacy, which has really kind of been an online thing, where this generation who are making these articles and typing these things up are kind of just running with fake information, and they're just kind of, it's like a snowball effect. It starts off with one thing with the rumor, and then all of a sudden it grows to Spielberg, and it grows to this, and it grows to that. And people are just so strong about their opinions. And even when they would reach out to us while we're filming this, and they'd be so strong at the beginning when they'd say like, oh, Hollywood killed Heather. And then I kind of sit back, I'm like, okay, tell me what you know. Like, what do you think? And then the more I talk to them, start kind of poking holes in what they're saying. And then they're like, actually, I don't really know. It's like, okay. It's okay, but you were so strong before when you're talking to me about this. And it's just,
Yeah,
it is
and it's
frustrating.
sad because there is Hollywood child abuse. There's abuse that does happen, but not to Heather. It didn't. And
Yeah.
it's disrespectful to her family and to her, but
Mhm.
it's also disrespectful to the actual victims of abuse. The fact that Heather's death was unnecessary and preventable also makes people angry. But I wasn't really running into a lot of that. I was
Well, I think that's kind of where it starts from is you can kind of see what happens with this generation, why we wanted to put something out here that really just tells her true story, because people will, she's in a movie that's iconic and it's going to outlive all of us because Poltergeist is going to come across every single Halloween and people are going to see it for the first time in a new generation. And they will kind of all go through that process where they'll first kind of see her and go, oh, I wonder what she looks like today. And then they Google and they see, oh my God, she died. Oh my goodness, she died so young. And then they will start going down that rabbit hole. And the thing is, when they start going down the rabbit hole, they will find all these horrible things that are just not true. And because when they read the truth, it just kind of sounds like gobbledygook to them when they hear all these medical terms and things like intestinal stenosis and septic shock and congenital birth
mm-hmm.
defect. It just doesn't sound very satisfying. The things that kind of jump out to them are when they hear terms like mysterious or like unknown. And that was only because in the first like day or two when she died, the newspapers, they didn't really know what happened. And then it took maybe 24, 48 hours to kind of understand, I guess, what happened. But those article headlines still live out there. So people will read something like mysterious, and then they will be like, oh, there must be some Hollywood cover up, or there must be this. And then they start making their own. It's like it kind of sounds more satisfying to the reader to try to think that there was some like abuse versus just something like a medical malpractice type deal.
I mean, mysterious is one thing, but what comes next is literally just sick and horrifying.
Yeah, because there's nothing mysterious about her death. It's nothing
We
mysterious.
had the E True Hollywood stories, like, the poltergeist curse. Okay. But then in 2017,
Yeah.
and yeah, NT reports a blind item that he publishes it on Crazy Days and Nights.
All we know is that he published it. So whether or not he wrote it or someone else submitted it, it's kind of like the fact that somebody put this together. And it was very, I'm not going to say cleverly put together, but I mean, this wasn't something that someone just wrote. Whoever put this together did their research on her and they
They
kind of,
wanted it to appear that it was written by a certain specific person on a set.
yeah, and whoever kind of wrote this had some knowledge on Heather, at least basic knowledge by a deep dive and kind of looking at her credits on her IMDb and kind of tried to put together. I think that's kind of about Crazy Days and Nights and their blind items is that it kind of as a viewer, as a watcher, as I used to do at times, it's kind of like a game. They would kind of there was a game aspect to it where they would kind of tell a whole story and it was like up to you and the audience to kind of guess who they're talking about. So it's kind of like they give you all these clues and then you kind of see if you get who they are referring to. So when whoever is creating any of these, they go kind of backwards and they try to they come up with their
Hmm.
conclusion first, and then they will sit there and give the clues. I can understand the fun of kind of being a follower of this website, but it's like, and then kind of playing the game of like, somebody submitted this, or I mean, as we know, we don't really think it's not like this guy was NT's not exactly TMZ. People aren't exactly constantly emailing him to break news. It's more like, but also if I was someone who wanted to create something, you would submit that because there's no verification of anything. It's not about, is this the truth? It's more, is this like a fun game to post?
Right. I mean, and he has been sued before.
It's this gray area where, because I'm actually an attorney myself, so it's like I know that right now the technology moves faster than the law. So that's why there's a lot of things like third party who publishes something, are they responsible? And kind of a lot of times online with free speech and everything, they can kind of hide behind some kind of an immunity, kind of like Yelp. For Yelp, does Yelp have a duty to kind of monitor every single post on there? And the answer is not really, because that would curb creativity. And also if someone has a bad experience at a restaurant or something and they say really horrible things, it's kind of not really the publisher's place to say, hey, this is probably not true. This is true. It's tricky. It's very gray, my point.
Yeah, I agree. And what even to that end, he says on his website that this is all made up from his imagination for entertainment purposes. He's admitting he's knowingly writing this for entertainment, and this is the blind item that he posts.
On the Crazy Days and Nights website, NT Lawyer writes a very crazy and problematic blind about the sweet Heather O'Rourke. And it was written 2009, titled Molesters Killed Her. And you'll see when I click on it, it has since disappeared. He very seldom deletes any of his blinds, But this one was extremely problematic and more than likely untrue from many accounts and also medical records, which we will get into later. But Enzi himself writes, back in the mid 80s was peak child molesting time in Hollywood. There was no internet. There were very few mobile phones. Children came to the set where they were left alone by their parents. For the next 8 hours, they were subject to every kind of horrible thing you can imagine. Schmugs were commonplace. They were used to try and get the kids to not be so hysterical when being assaulted. Producers loved casting shows with kids and tweens. If someone pitched a show that involved a handful of tweens with a dozen tween extras per week, it would get a green light. Even if the show was going to suck and everyone knew it was going to suck, if you got the right spetto at the studio, he would say yes just to come for the casting and taping of the pilot. As sad as it is to say, there were a lot of parents who told their kids to go off with the nice man in the suit and do what he says. It was a sick, sick time. It was just past the mid 80s when a producer came up with the idea of a tween show that not only would feature a rotating cast of extras, but would make the studio a bunch of money because they would film quickly and not hire any adults. Further, the faster they filmed, the more time they would have to molest all the kids that would be hanging around. From the first day, it was the worst place on earth if you were a kid. The studio where the show was filmed also had several other shows being filmed there, most of which featured lots of children. Executives would drive over to Hollywood right before lunch and would stay at the studio for several hours each day. Anyway, on this particular show, there was a very special guest star. A special guest star, still not a tween. Everyone knew who she was. Executives flocked to the studio that day to see her. She was first molested when she was 5 or 6 and had continued to be molested throughout her hit movies and also on previous show. One of the stars of the show, who has spent her life bouncing in and out of rehab because of what she saw and who was actually nominated for awards from the show, described the atmosphere that day. A bunch of effing pigs. I had just turned 12 or 13. I was the same age as the actress coming in, and maybe a little older. We had been shooting for months, and I was old news. They knew I would do what they wanted, but they always wanted someone new. This was someone new and someone they all knew. They had it set up like a peep show almost. She had finished shooting that morning, and they had brought her out on stage. The stage was used most of the time for a game show that was taped there. That game show is still on today. I can't watch it knowing what happened to her there. They brought her out, and the front 4 rows of the theater was filled with guys who were already rubbing themselves. The girl was wearing a bikini. The show took place around a beach just so they can make these girls wear next to nothing. They had her walk around under lights. The lights were focused on her, and she couldn't really see out to the audience. She was squinting. It must have been blinding for her. They had her walk back and forth. Then they had her start dancing. All of these guys were doing what another star at the same studio just got busted for. This went on for about 20 minutes. Then the 3 of the guys took her to a different area of the studio. The actress didn't see what happened, but about 45 minutes later, one of those 3 guys came running out and needed a set medic. Apparently, they had inserted something inside and things were bad. The medic came and the ambulance came. The parents of the girl told some crap story. That crap story ended up killing the girl because the parents believed the executives. 2 weeks later, the show finished shooting 6 episodes all at once, and then everyone was sent on their way forever. No one wanted the kids around or any.
Yeah, when this first came out, it didn't say who they were talking about, and then they added later what the quote unquote answer was.
I know that people had guessed Devin Odessa told him this in a blind, but he wasn't in an episode with Heather. So it's hard to imagine that she would have been the one to write this rumor.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I mean, when of course I read this, of course it gets you angry, but it also I've got like a smile on my face because of like shaking my head because of just how ridiculous it is. I mean, anyone who really knows the situation, I know the person who created this was looking at her IMDb and saw Rocky Road, which is probably the
Mhm.
most obscure credit that she has on her resume. It was like some Saturday morning little show that didn't get a lot of attention and also has like no online presence. I mean, there's really like no clips online, like especially Heather's appearance. So that's kind of like the perfect example to use. But the thing that they don't know, I mean, they're sitting here talking about it was like a kid show. I mean, it wasn't a kid show. There was what they said like the rotating group of all these children.
Mhm.
The whole thing, the actual show. I mean, there was one minor on the show, and it was pretty rare that they would have guest stars that were minors as well. Because we interviewed the girl who they're implying is obviously the one who they targeted. Whoever wrote this piece was like, okay, here's another person around Heather's age. Just for the record, she knew nothing about this. I mean, it took her aback that there was even someone writing something about it. And Rocky Road was such a happy experience and a happy, safe set. There's like literally no truth to this at all. Saying about, putting her in a bikini and walking around. I mean, they just know that the show kind of took place like in like a beachfront ice cream parlor, but her appearance on the show, she wasn't in a bathing suit at all. She was playing like a Russian exchange student, and which is kind of a fun show. And it's just one of those things where there's literally no truth to this.
Some commenter online actually commented on it saying, I'm guessing this is one of NT's pedophile related blinds that he's been fixated on for years. That is the general consensus. It seems obsessive to write that much about something. This is just my opinion, allegedly, knowing that it's false, based on like my experience with this person and their previous court cases and everything, and knowing what we know.
Yeah, I mean, also it's more that like, you think about the thing that's so atrocious about that rumor in particular is that it's what it's alleging. It's alleging that these people, put an object inside of her and that's what actually led to her death. Like that's kind of what caused it. And also that like, it implies or insinuates that family allowed her to do something like this, or that these producers, I mean, the producers of the show who are actually good people. I mean, like, that it's just, I mean, the thing is maybe some of this type of stuff maybe happened maybe on other sets. I mean, I can't imagine. It's kind of like what somebody's mind thinks, oh, I bet this is probably how it went down. And you even see how it's read. I mean, how it's written. It's
Mhm.
written kind of in this very storytelling type way. But I mean,
It's so horrific. It's just so horrific to think about that happening to any child.
yeah, and as a
And
producer of the film, it's like, I mean, of course, like how much light do you give a rumor like this? Because we, of course, at the beginning wanted to just really do our homework. And I mean, I've seen Heather's medical records. I've seen everything. And there was, I mean, even to the point where I saw them a few months after she guest starred on this show because she was having stomach problems relating to her illness, not because of anything like that. And they did full body checks on her and everything was fine. Like it even talked about, areas that they talk about in that horrible rumor and everything was okay. And of course, it was one of those things where as a producer, at one point we did film us kind of going over them and then made the decision, you know what, we know this is not true. And we don't want to give this much light because the people who are going to choose to believe this are going to believe this regardless. And it's one of those things because these people like want to believe this narrative. And there's really nothing that you can say because they'll have some answer.
would be one thing if it was just this fringe group of people, but the explosion of this, because of the people that are being abused in Hollywood, there is just this massive amount of people that do believe this. And there's hundreds of thousands of views on the TikToks about this blind item, which is really sad. Why does this rumor have some legs? How did it spread? How does it become really an urban legend? And I think an open secret. And now, obviously, with Quiet on Set, it's going to come back around. So I think we can talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, because it's always that snowball effect where with something with timing, when something like Quiet on the Set, which just came out and exposed a situation and a really horrible set, and of course, like viewers will just make this blanket statement like, "Oh my goodness, this is Hollywood. This is how it always is with every set." Just imagine the stories that are not being told, and so they kind of will then try to become the armchair reporter, and they'll sit there with on their computer and start looking and, oh, I wonder what else happened and who else is either hiding a story. And then they'll kind of go through the usual names of people who passed away and names
Well,
like
and it's not
Jonathan Brandis.
hidden and it's not,
Yeah.
you don't have to guess. There's a whole story made up for you. You don't even have to try and theorize, really.
Yeah, exactly. And so then they'll read that and it kind of will trigger that part in their brain, like, oh my goodness, yes, and then here's Heather. Let's see who she worked with. Oh my goodness, she worked with Steven Spielberg, with Henry Winkler, with all these big people in the 80s. So they start just making up these narratives just based on literally nothing. I mean, there's no truth to anything. And Heather's name kind of comes back up because of the fact that she passed away. And because she
Yeah.
passed away of a stomach illness, so then people could sit there like this rumor, which really this rumor feeds that kind of theory that that's what caused her death, or it wasn't a medical malpractice, and kind of like these clueless parents and all these kind of stuff. And the thing that's so terrible with Heather is like her mom was by her side every moment. I mean, such a smart woman, close woman, and nothing happened to Heather. Her Hollywood experience, because she wasn't a Hollywood family, it wasn't like even with like the Barrymores, where Drew was kind of hanging out at parties afterwards. Heather never did that. They lived like in San Diego, Big Bear. They drive up here, she would do her part, then they go back home.
What's scary or sad or concerning or alarming, I guess, also to me is that you've got an open secret which exposes like all of this, Hollywood pedophilia and just horrible things going on in Hollywood. And you've got Gabe Hoffman as the producer. And then he is appearing on NT Lawyer's podcast to talk about Heather for multiple episodes. And I had them transcribed because I didn't want to actually listen to them talk about her and all of this gross like fan fiction snuff stuff that they're doing. Reading through the transcript, it does look like Gabe pushes back a lot on these theories that NT has and that Crazy Days and Nights has had published. But it's concerning to me and alarming, like I said, that somebody who would be involved with such a powerful, a kind of underground movie like an Open Secret would be collaborating with NT Lawyer, Crazy Days and Nights, and talking about something like this. That's kind of alarming to me.
It did seem that Gabe was, kind of taking an intelligent approach to it. I mean, he was debunking, or at least giving his kind of intelligent opinion that some of this doesn't sound right. He was feeding he just didn't really, I think, have the knowledge. I mean, in all fairness, I mean, why would he? But he didn't have really any knowledge on Heather other than just him using some common sense. Yeah.
There's a lot to the whole Gabe thing. I think that's even maybe a whole other episode because like I said, I find it concerning. I've also heard that that documentary had a lot of issues. Drake Bell had issues with them. He did not want to talk to them about his trauma and they did not respect that. The whole Open Secret documentary crew was extremely problematic in multiple ways. And I just think there's even more to Gabe and NT's connection as far as blind items and planting information, allegedly conspiracy. What do I know? But like I said, I think that's a whole episode for another day. And side note, Alexa's stalker is friends with one of the people from an Open Secret. So that's just weird, just weird things.
Yeah, it's kind of like the underbelly of this wonderful movement. Like I'm just talking about like the few bad parts of it, the few bad people, the bad apples that come from a real big platform.
Exactly.
So as like, a producer of the documentary about Heather, as I was talking about, it's like, as a duty, we have, I'm telling Heather's story, and that's what we're trying to do here. And when we come across something that we have now proven amongst us is completely false, it's kind of like doesn't deserve much light for us to it. It shouldn't be part of Heather's story. Such garbage. I can sit here and debunk every little thing about it, but is that worth?
Right. I mean, well, Gabe made a good point about the lawsuit that followed afterwards. And if there were any signs of any other, than the hospital's negligence and that led to Heather's death, they would have uncovered that. And NT doubled down that he heard it from a reliable source. Then later, NT then published two more rumors about Heather a couple of years later. And now we're in 2020. And it's so horrifying. It's so awful to even talk about this kind of stuff.
On the Crazy Days and Nights website, NT posted in 2020 another disturbing blind about Heather O'Rourke. And when I click on it again, you'll notice it has since been removed. This is the third blind I can think of that he has deleted besides the first Heather O'Rourke blind and the ones relating to Diana Jenkins who sued him. But this blind says, for nearly a decade, the things that occurred at the tomb of this deceased A-minus list child star actually resulted in her body being permanently moved to an unmarked grave in 2001. She was originally placed in an above ground mausoleum, which is still marked with her name, and at which people still leave flowers and teddy bears. The weird stuff began happening the day after her interment. A man was seen after sundown taking a bouquet of flowers from her grave, but he fled before he could be identified. In the summer of 1988, someone used red spray paint to write, "All worn out," RR, across the marble face of her vault. The family was notified, it was photographed, and then, over the course of 5 hours, the vault was cleaned. The police were called, but they didn't think it was important. For whatever reason, the photograph didn't develop properly. Sometime in the fall of 1988, another man, probably the same as before, but there is no way of knowing, was spotted kneeling in front of her tomb after dark. He also fled when spotted. On the anniversary of her death in 1989, her family, mom, dad, stepdad, sister, grandparents, gathered at the tomb to remember her. It was very somber. They held hands. The sister placed the little stuffed Dumbo in front of the grave. As they were about to leave, a man approached them and said something which frightened the mother. Her dad and stepdad each took her by an arm and led her away back over to their car. Then they left. The identified man stayed behind and picked up the little Dumbo that the sister left and stuffed it in his pocket before leaving. Now, here's where things get really strange. There wasn't much activity around her grave for several years. Then, in about 1991, her body was exhumed. It was done in the dark, so no one would notice. Her body was returned to the tomb 3 days later. In 1992, her body was exhumed a second time. One of the police present was asked, "Why were you exhuming her again?" He said, "What do you mean again?" Turns out the first exhumation wasn't legal, even though they had what looked like real police and really good paperwork. What, and why did they want with the body of a deceased 12-year-old? Surely it would warrant an investigation, right? Nope. Anyway, the coroner's office kept her for about a week before she was brought back, and we re-interned her. In 1994, somebody had smashed the face of her tomb, removed her body, cut some hair from her head, and fortunately placed her back in the crypt. A worker there saw the corpse, and he said she looked remarkably well preserved. He started to float the possibility that her body had actually been replaced with an actual replica. The police investigation went nowhere. In 1999, there was another vandalism of the tomb. It wasn't another smashing, but red paint had been used again to write BK killed me. In the summer of 2001, her family had her body moved to an unmarked grave below ground grave.
And it was one that really did not get legs. I mean, it was because even people in the comments on that one were just like, "Oh, come on, this is ridiculous." It kind of makes you just think like, who's writing that? If I'm trying to at least give him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he didn't write it, someone, even if someone gave it to him, he made the choice to publish it.
And why? Like, what, whose head is this coming from? It's so morbid. And then in 2021, I guess he's not done with it because he made one during the filming of the documentary where the person claimed that Heather's sister Tammy made a comment about Spielberg, something like, if only we didn't have lunch with that man, Heather would still be alive. And to my knowledge, like, Tammy never said that. Is that right, Brian?
Oh, that's 100%. I can. It's she never said that, and we were on the set when we kind of read that because it was while we were filming. So obviously, somebody, people knew that we were making the documentary. The hardcore Heather fans, whether it was NT or just somebody who submitted the stuff to him, but they and that type of comment. I mean, that is just so. It's like they're just making things up. Tammy is a great person, and of course, to defame Spielberg. I mean, because Spielberg seems to be a target for this group, which I I don't understand. Maybe I'm a little ignorant when it comes to kind of QAnon and everything, like why they don't like Jewish people. I don't know why it would even matter if they were Jewish or Catholic or Mormon, or maybe I'm just kind of this ignorant, like liberal kind of person that's like, I'm thinking like, what does that have to do with anything?
Got this letter I obtained that was sent by a listener to Nick Bailey, who's in
Nick, yeah, my producing partner. Yeah.
yeah, and they're kind of trying to explain their point of view, and I found it interesting. So I do want to read it. They say that writer as NT of Three Blind Items pushing criminal theories about the death of Heather, the supposed desecration of her grave, and Tammy O'Rourke blaming Steven Spielberg for her death. He also devoted 2 full-length episodes of his paying podcast to her in 2019, where Gabe Hoffman was a guest. I'm reaching out to you, the director of the Heather O'Rourke documentary, instead of trying to approach her family directly, because I considered that they have suffered enough and already have been approached too many times by lunatics. I don't want to be a stranger who's the umpteenth person reviving painful memories in them. But if you consider it appropriate to pass the relevant information to them, it may help to prevent this terrible individual from posting more fabricated stories now that he has to answer for them directly. He has been posting on CDAN hundreds of stories about celebrities and child molestation since 2017. His motivation appears to be solely financial. He wanted to appeal to the crowds who had already fully embraced the Pizzagate conspiracy theories and decided to make a series of allegations against Hollywood figures such as Steven Spielberg, David Geffen, out of thin air starting in November 17. He has zero connections with the industry as far as we know, and to our knowledge, most of his stories just come from checking the IMDb or Wikipedia entry of his sub. Nelson more or less looks for any premature or suspicious death of with a connection to his true targets to appeal to his readers. He relies a lot on anti-Semitic stereotypes, as these stories are variations on the blood libels, the accusations on Jews committing ritual murders on Christian children. As Heather was a blue-eyed blonde girl, he used her to fit his narrative without any concern for her legacy or the harm that would cause to her family. And I know that the letter goes on with more information about how much he's actually profiting, thousands and thousands a month off of these types of lies and pain. But I thought it's just so accurate to me
Yeah,
anyway.
it makes sense. I mean, I guess it's more just, I mean, Heather unfortunately just kind of fits a lot of those boxes. Like where I guess if someone wants to create a story and appeal to a certain demographic, physically and just that who she happened to work with, it's kind of, I can understand. I mean, the thing is, I always try to understand everything. I can understand why she is a target for these type of stories. Everything that you were reading was kind of, it would just made sense to me. And I kind of don't think that whoever creates these things, whether it's NT or someone submitting it to NT, it's more that they're, you don't think of Heather as a person. They just kind of, this was someone's child, this was someone's friend, their sibling. And I mean, yeah, it happened 35 years ago, but I'm telling you, this is something you never get over. I mean, yeah, everyone's kind of moved forward, but like, it's still a wound that's very, I guess, still present. It's a scar. And the sad thing is it's like kind of like, I mean, pardon my French, I mean, they kind of shit on her memory. There's no truth to any of this. And to kind of put her in this, I mean, it's already tragic enough what happened to her, just that,
Right.
she was misdiagnosed by a doctor and it wasn't really anything of the parents' fault. And then one of those worst nightmares. And her death was traumatic for everyone. I mean, because she was such a vibrant, happy, sweet person. And her experience in Hollywood, which I know a lot of people have horrible experiences, Heather's was very good. Her parents kept her very grounded and she was treated very well on every single set that she was on. I mean, yeah, she got lucky. I guess there weren't any of the bad ones. Not saying that she would have ever fell to a victim of any of them, but she wasn't. And it's like for then all these years later, for people to like say these horrible things about Spielberg or Henry Winkler, who was so kind to their family and so kind to Heather, and then to basically shit on that memory for no reason, it's just horrible. It hurts my heart.
It does. It is. It's sad and it's deranged. I mean, to the point where they're making up stories about like her being turned into shoes
Yeah, but those
and
are just stupid. I mean, and
in
Macaulay Culkin,
it's easy to
I
laugh
saw that
off
one.
until you see how many people are engaging with this with these posts and with this type of content. It's actually terrifying. But when we circle back to the blind item about her tomb, it says that on the anniversary of her death in 89, her family, her mom, dad, stepdad, sister, grandparents gathered at the tomb to remember her.
Again, I read these things and I've got a lot of background knowledge, or it's like I can tell you that that is not true. It's like one of those things where you don't want information out there because then that just gives people more ammunition to then create things like this. It's funny when you do as much research as like my producing partner and I did on this whole situation, you kind of know what's true and what's not. Even a little statement like her family, her mom, dad, stepdad, sister, and grandparents all gathered at the tomb to remember her. I'm not going to say why, but I know there's a reason that did not happen. All those people is my point. So the fact that, I can sit there and poke holes in it, but it's like, why poke holes in something that's so obviously false? Then you take a step back after you've poked the holes and you know it's false. Then you're thinking like, geez, who would just create this? I mean, like, who would just write this? And just, so that means somebody just made this up one night.
It's obsessive. I think
that's the part that kind of just bothers me, and that's why we're making a documentary on Heather's life, where most people realistically don't know about these things unless you do a deep dive. When we have a platform, hopefully, the hope is that this documentary we're doing is going to reach millions of people for years. It's like you kind of don't want to put this in their head, because then even when you're putting it out there and saying it's false, there's someone who's going to be thinking maybe it's not false.
Maybe in the future when people say, oh, but I heard something horrible had happened to her, maybe when they Google search, they'll actually see like, no, that was just written by a creepy lunatic who admits it's all fake.
Yeah, well, award-winning documentarian, while I was doing this, kind of told me one piece of advice when you're doing a documentary that is something to keep in mind, is they say that, like, I think they say 33% of the people who are watching this are going to love it regardless. Like, they're going to either be friends of yours, or they love Heather, they love this. So they're going to, no matter how good or bad it is, they're going to love it. 33% is going to hate it. They're going to like think everything you're saying is false. They're going to, for whatever reason, they're going to have their own thoughts, and there's nothing you can do to change them. And so you're pretty much making the documentary for that last 33%. As you're filming it, you think like that's who you're targeting. You're targeting that 33% who has their mind not made up. And that's what you're going to be kind of targeting. For those 33% who are going to just debunk everything you're saying because they have their own mentality and their own thing, you're not making the film for them.
I know it's going to focus on Heather's life and her legacy. You had talked a little bit about how much do you guys really include with all of like the rumors and things like that, quiet on set, and just like this major public interest in what's going on with children in Hollywood. I want to see things like this debunked, shown a light on. It tarnishes her legacy even more.
Yeah, it's tricky as a producer of this, because it's like so many times the documentary can take different shapes. It can easily go off on a tangent, and we could have done a whole documentary on the lawsuit that happened afterwards. That could have been a whole documentary on there. But you try to stay focused, and we can go off on on the rumors. So that's why when you're a decision that we went back and forth quite a bit. I mean, I would say probably that was the discussion of those probably had the most discussions, like at least talking to different filmmakers, and because we have a duty. I mean, of course, as a human being, I want to just stand up on a mountaintop and be like, this is not true, you idiots. Like, here's the truth, and here's this, and here's that, and here's this. And it's like, but I'm also a producer here. So it's like my job is to tell her story. And it's kind of like by presenting the actual truth, you're debunking it without really debunking it. Kind of like, so you see how it really was. And then people are going to then read a rumor like this and be like, oh, this can't be true, because this is who Heather really was.
Absolutely.
This is who the mom was. And look at and when you see kind of parts of the documentary when Heather's mom is reliving that horrific morning when Heather passed away. I mean, it just kind of breaks your heart. I mean, when you watch it, you want to give her mom a hug. I mean, it's like, it just was kind of, it really hit me hard, 35 years later, and you see how raw it still is. I mean, like she immediately, she was right there 35 years ago. And just kind of, it's when anyone watches this, and they will hopefully, read a rumor if they ever come across this and be like, how dare you? I mean, this is like, just, it's really just terrible.
It is. And it's beyond rumors.
Yeah. At one point with NT, we did request an interview with him, and he kind of sideswiped it. I think that Nick reached out, or someone reached out from our production, and he kind of, I think on his podcast or something, said, oh yeah, okay, I'll do an interview. And then, totally ghosted. I mean, what's he going to say? I mean, especially when we know that it's completely false, and he really has I mean, it's kind of, I think it would be real awkward, because if he was ever going to talk to the family members, and
he's doing this to true crime victims. He's doing it, I mean, to lots of children. It's the same pattern. It's all obsessive. It's all dark.
Well, it's pandering to an audience, like you said. It's like you're kind of like, if you want to satisfy this audience that either pays his bills or grows the audience, okay, so I can see why he would then create that rumor in 2020 about, like, a kid's great. The details of that one are just only more horrific because the fact that it's not true, that you're thinking that someone just made it up. And it's like, it's at the end of the day, it's like, hey, you're talking about a little girl's corpse. Come on now. Again, he's pandering to an audience, and there's a lot of, I've got a legal background and so does he. So I mean, I think he's a smart guy where he knows, what he can get away with and what he can't. Yeah, with defamation, which is, what can't defame a dead person. So I mean, like you can't. That's why it's like people like Heather, parents can sue if she's defamed, if she hasn't, like the mom or someone else. As far as, Heather, they can say whatever they want. We can say whatever we want about Marilyn Monroe or Elvis Presley. They're gone, so they're not going to suffer any damages because they're not here. So it's a
I
very weird
mean,
place.
he
And then
has
I
lied about the sister. And so I do wonder if the family has ever considered suing just for like emotional distress or anything.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to sue on that and go through it, but it's like biggest defense to defamation is, especially of a public figure, is that they are knowingly making a lie. It's hard to prove that someone knowingly is lying because I mean, he or anyone could be like, well, I thought it was true, but like you kind of have to have proof that like, he either said to someone else or he has documentation, oh, I'm going to make up this rumor about so and so.
Well, he does. I mean, he has that disclaimer on his website. He says, like, this is all made up. This is just for fun. So, what he considers fun is writing about dead children's
Yeah, well,
rape
it's hard to,
and
when you're a public figure, it is hard because the burden is a lot higher that they have to really prove.
mhm.
It's kind of like, I guess the law kind of figures when you put yourself out there in the public. And
Yeah.
so you voluntarily do put yourself out there. So that's why the bar is higher. You kind of know that comes with the territory.
And that's where it feels like there isn't a lot of justice, kind of like too little, too late. Even if they could do something, the damage is already done. And that's why I think that this documentary is so important because it is kind of, like you said, like a love letter to Heather and her memory. She was such a great actress and obviously really impacted everybody that knew her because you watch these interviews. I've seen just a tiny bit of these interviews with her old friends that you guys were able to get. And this is like the best friend that you would have kept for life from the time of elementary school. And she was just a normal kid. She did go to school. She loved her family. She loved going to school. She loved working and she was funny and dynamic. And I think that's such a great thing. And there's so much that you guys are uncovering with this documentary, like just from the little bit that I saw, anyways, with her health issues.
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing that was so great is, you never know what you're going to encounter when you jump into this. Of course, I didn't know what Heather was going to be like as a person. We could have interviewed people and they could have said she was a snot. Like, you just have no ideas. The thing that was kind of interesting, I mean, hours of conversations with random friends from Big Bear, Anaheim, people who've never spoken about her publicly ever. And the thing that I found so interesting was every single person that I spoke with on the phone or anything all started off with the same line. And I just find it very interesting that they all said the same thing first. And I just think it was interesting because why would they? I mean, the first thing that everyone said was that Heather was really normal. They felt the need to say that first, which of course meant that they were surprised. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys, I mean, I grew up with some former child actors or people who were acting, and you kind of knew like right away, oh, that's someone who's trying to act, like, because they were kind of obnoxious. They were real, like always like, oh, I was on the Wonder Years last night. It's like they were very me. And Heather was the complete opposite. Like, the last thing she would want to do is to talk about Poltergeist or like she wanted or give any special treatment. And I think that's kind of what took people aback, classmates, because she'd walk in there and then they were just surprised at how normal she was. First, she ran for like a fifth grade president, wasn't using any of the poltergeist stuff, refused to do it. Like, she was kind of like, I'm going to win this on my own merit. So that's kind of the thing that everyone said about her, like friend wise, who didn't even know
Oh, just
each
like
other.
totally down to earth.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, because her discovery, which is like one of those famous like Alana Turner discovery story, it was always this really sweet, fun story. And then because of how we are nowadays, like in the last 4 years, people have now shifted that sweet encounter into this like predatory, horrible. Kind of came up to her and like, it was very respectful, very nice. But of course, then people now have turned that story into like this someone, I guess it's just the times, but it's just kind of sad that, this once like beautiful kind of fun thing is now kind of turned into this, people look at it differently. And it's like, the story never changed because it was one of those things where he was having trouble finding his Carol Ann. He was all these people people were auditioning, and then he happens to go in there, and her sister Tammy was dancing in a movie, and Heather was just there, and he looked over and said, "Oh my goodness, that looks like Carol Ann right there. Like that's, I don't even know if she's an actress. I know nothing." And he came over and he spoke with, and it's like, just very calmly, like I said to her, like, is your mom here? Like, he wanted to kind of talk and see if she's an actress. Yeah, so I mean, it was, everything was very innocent and sweet, and it's just annoying to, like I was saying earlier, that like people, as time goes on, like her legacy is going to continue to get shit on more. It's like for no reason.
And it kind of
Yeah.
happened with Drew Barrymore a little bit too, right? Until she came out the other side of it. But there's so many connections with Heather O'Rourke and Drew Barrymore that are unexplored.
Oh yeah, no, totally. I mean, it's funny that I wasn't even thinking, as you dig deep into this, and I start digging deep into as we were producing this, and I didn't even realize how much of a connection her and Drew had, just in general, because they both kind of, I guess, springboarded from the same vessel at the same time. Like they both kind of, that summer, that magical summer of Spielberg of 1982, when Poltergeist, I mean, it's funny, I don't know if you realize Poltergeist and ET came out 1 week apart. Poltergeist filmed first, and then it went right into ET. And like they both filmed, I think, the summer of 81. Interesting thing was kind of that after this movie launched, the two of them were number one and number two hottest child actors in the whole industry. Like all of a sudden that summer, there's these two young 6 or 7 year old girls who were like A-list. And the interesting thing between the two of them is the two of them had very different personalities. Drew was a major extrovert, outgoing, says the funny lines, very quick. So she was the one all the talk shows and everyone kind of wanted. Heather, on the other hand, was kind of shy. She kind of was just a very different personality, but they were friendly, the two of them, with one another. But the industry kind of tried to paint them as like rivals.
I'm sure they would have been going out for a lot of the same roles as teens,
Yeah,
and as time went on, I'm sure.
yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why, we didn't get an opportunity to talk to Drew about her experience with Heather. I mean, I kind of knew what Heather thought of Drew, and she thought, highly of her. I mean, if they had very, very different lifestyles, because Drew was very much in the Hollywood scene, kind of with her, living with her single mom who was taking her out to the parties and all that kind of stuff. Heather was complete opposite. She would, like I said, she'd film her TV show or her movie and then go right back home and, be a normal kid with her family and her sister and go to school. So it's like she was never mingling with the crowds, like ever, unless, she had to. Her mom had a mentality of she'll act, and if she doesn't get another role after this, whatever, it's fine. Like she wasn't trying to push her daughter in anything. It was more just, and Heather was cool with that. So it's like the two of them were living these kind of parallel lives. And then the interesting part that I always kind of wonder in general was 1988 when Heather passed away. That was, if you look at the timeline, that was, I think, peak Drew Barrymore's rough time. That was like when
Hmm.
she was, I think, in rehab or whatnot. And I just kind of wonder where Drew was when she heard about Heather's passing. Because on the other end, Heather was at a very good place in her personal life. And she was like in school in the 7th grade, and she had Poltergeist 3 about to come out, and she was just at a very good spot. And it's kind of like she ends up passing away. And Drew at the time is on a horrible road where that could be her demise. And I kind of think that Heather kind of looked at Drew as like kind of her Hollywood soul sister, because Heather really didn't have any Hollywood friends. Like her friends were all just her normal friends. But I think she really felt that connection with Drew, like because they kind of launched at the same time. So,
It's sad. And I read Little Girl Lost, but I ended up not finishing it. I'm gonna end up giving it away on the Patreon at some point.
mhm.
She was in rehab when she writes this book, and she's living years beyond her age. Meanwhile, Heather's living just a life of a normal kid. Fun to see all of the behind the scenes stuff with her. When you watch like the old True Hollywood stories, she's having so much fun filming.
Oh yeah, well, Heather really wanted to be a director, and that was kind of her trajectory, what she wanted so badly. And she was even on her last movie set that she did was the Poltergeist 3. And we interviewed the director, and he talks about how she just wanted to be in his director's chair. And she kind of went up to him on the first day and said, like, I want to be a director, so I'm gonna be watching you. And he's like, that's totally cool. She's like, do you mind if when I'm not on set, would you mind if I kind of like hung out so I can watch? And there's pictures of her sitting in his director's chair. So it's like he really loved that there was this little kid interested in filming. And something that people don't know, I believe we don't mention this in the documentary, which is something I found out, is that like, she, during the filming of Poltergeist 3, she got a new agent, like she switched agents. And this particular agent who was going to take her on had no children on his roster. So she was going to be the only child on his roster, because he was kind of looking at her as maybe like the next Jodie Foster. Like he was going to maybe try to market her in that way. And of course, sadly, we never got to see that. Who knows what would have happened after Poltergeist 3 if she would have been kind of up for a different type of role articles or maybe try to do some behind the scene things. Kind of, I think, also what gets people upset when they hear about the Heather story. It's just one of those things where I always make the mistake of when you go online and you try to respond to people's ridiculous stories, because it's like they're not going to Spielberg. It'll say like Spielberg say what happened to Heather. It's like I want to respond, but like they're
There's
not going to care about what I say.
comments on Reddit threads, TikToks, like I said, YouTube videos. I think it's good that we did this episode for exactly that.
People are going to hear what we're going to say and they're going to think I'm full of shit. The point being is like they're going to believe what they want. To be honest, anyone who's believing the thing about the shoes and Macaulay Culkin, I mean, does not have a high IQ. I mean, it's like anyone who's going to choose
Yeah.
to believe those things, they're just ridiculous.
It's so important to get Heather's real story out there. It's exciting that this documentary is going to do that, even though I know it's going to be hard to watch. Like, I think it's going to be sad, but it's also going to be happy. So I'm excited.
I'm excited for it to finally come out. It is, sad because it's kind of like when you watch the movie Titanic, you know what's happening. Like, the ship's going to sink. People I've showed the film to, it's like they're watching it and like halfway through, they're like falling in love with this little kid and I know that she's going to die. I know that it's getting to that part. And then kind of really seeing when it gets to that part and seeing how everyone reacted to that and everyone's, because the thing is, what's so special about this documentary is one of her friends said to me, like privately, she goes, this is the first time I've ever gotten to speak about Heather with a smile. Like in
Aw.
35, her death was so traumatic to everyone, even her co-stars and everything, that I think that with trauma, if anyone ever does bring it up to them, which they always do, anyone connected to her, they have their guard up. Like they kind of like, okay, here comes the Heather question. They're gonna ask about it. It's like, and then they just will give a generic answer like, she was great, she was sweet, she was nice, she was this. And then they have their two little stories they share. You kind of pierce through that and they're not on the defensive. It's more like then they can start remembering, like talking to her girlfriends and reading notes they passed back and forth in class, and kind of like saying like, I remember, Heather would do this and would do that, and this funny time one time we did this, and it's the time when they're just like, it's nice to be talking about her. Really with trauma, especially when you're young, you kind of just don't. It's hard to not think of Heather as that friend that passed away when I was 12 and had this all of a sudden she was at school one day and then she was not the next day, and then 2 days later I'm at her funeral with an open casket and I'm seeing her dead in there. So it's like it's really it's a real easy thing to want to just kind of bury in your mind. And then once you're in a safe place, like where we provided and with her family and stuff, and then the memories, it was fun seeing a couple of her friends talking to each other, like they were reminding each other of, remember we did this? Oh my goodness, yeah, I remember. I totally forgot about that. So it's a real kind of fun. Those were nice moments that I was kind of proud as a producer to be able to at least give to them.
Right. I mean, and can you imagine losing a friend at that age? That's horrific. I had just listened to the Odd podcast
Yeah.
and you guys had reviewed My Girl. And it's like such a traumatic thing to lose a friend at that age. And I can't
Yes.
imagine getting online and being somebody who actually knew her in real life and seeing some of this stuff, on the internet about her. It has to be wholly traumatizing. But then to like be able to have a safe space where they can actually reminisce is such a positive and like healing and thing.
And there's some hardcore Heather fans who are very lovely, very good people. But I know a lot of times it's like, I know her close friends have never really gone online and joined any of those groups or commented. One thing I can tell you is that Heather picked really good friends. Like her friends that we met were just genuinely good people. No one was ever about me and going, oh, I knew Heather. No comments on YouTube like, oh, by the way, Heather was my friend. They don't even ever engage with that. I know sometimes they've been reached out to by some of the Heather fans who are a little aggressive sometimes, and a couple of them and they did not want to give comps, don't really want to engage, and they don't feel like it's a safe space. And at least we provided them with it. And the community of Heather fans are actually very, very good. Like they're very caring people, but just like anything, you'll have your few bad apples who will like be obsessed with her death. And that's kind of really the driving force of why they're big fans of hers. I mean, for all I know,
it's
NT is on those message boards for the wrong reasons. And so it's just nice to be able to kind of like hear these stories and kind of, providing them with that place.
No, I totally agree. In an era where misinformation, gossip, and rumors, it can spread like wildfire through social media at this point. I keep saying TikTok, but like really, I mean, TikTok is insane how fast things spread. And it's more important than ever right now to like really critically evaluate the sources of information, especially when we're talking about abuse. When we're consuming this kind of content, we have to question the validity of these claims claims being made. And we can't just blindly accept it, like, no pun intended, like these blind items, but we can't just blindly accept conspiracy theories without evidence. Because it literally can have devastating consequences for the family. And not to mention, I just think that it's bad for our psyches and for society in general. And it makes me sad for what it says about us as people. So I think that what you're doing is amazing and it gives me hope. And I have a weird, similar fascination with Aaron Carter. And like a lot of people like to say that he was killed by Sony and there's all these different conspiracies, when in reality, he died because he was addicted to drugs. And that's important and that's okay to say. And that's something that can help people if we talk about it openly and talk about it in a real way. Just the truth is enough sometimes.
Yeah, but sometimes I think what happens is sometimes the truth is not satisfying for people. Like, I mean, something like Jonathan Brandis. I mean, he passed away. He committed suicide with no suicide note, with no nothing. So there's all these questions. And of course, like people online are trying to maybe make some foul play claims or like, he was really abused. And that's why I'm not saying any of those are not true, but we don't know that. Sometimes things are just what they are. And like even with Heather, I mean, her death was because of medical malpractice. She was
Yeah.
wrongfully diagnosed. And it's like, and the thing is, even though it was a wrong diagnosis, it wasn't a bad diagnosis because what happened with her was very rare. If you're going to defend at all the hospital, not like she wasn't being taken. She was being taken to doctors all over the place. But the thing is, her condition was very rare because most people with that condition that she had would have experienced a lot of pain at like age 3 or 4 or 5. Very rare for someone with that condition to not experience any pain until she's about 11. So that wasn't kind of on their radar that could have been what she had. So they diagnosed her with something else. But I mean, of course, maybe now because that happened to her and she's a public figure, it's like it may save some lives. Like maybe other people will think twice about it, or the doctors will be looking now for that condition. That's kind of, I think, what people don't realize too, that because everyone wants to blame someone. And of course they're to blame, but it's not like maliciously blamed.
Can raise
Yeah.
awareness to something that's seriously important. And that's was kind of my point with Aaron too.
Yeah, but people want to make things more with Aaron. And sometimes things are just what they are.
What inspired you guys to want to make this documentary, from this kind of vantage point or perspective?
Well, personally for me, Heather was my childhood crush. So she passed away when I was like 9. And so it's like, and of course that was pretty traumatic for me, just and of course very confusing, didn't understand. And I kind of just always said to me in the back of my mind that if I ever found myself in a position to kind of do something as a tribute to her, I would. Here we are. I think of Heather as a childhood friend. Like that's kind of what my mentality is on her. Like kind of she's like, I think of just like I think with all of us now, when the thing that's so great about social media and even with these 90s conventions or these cons, it's like when you come across these people, you kind of think of them as like friends. I was in high school while I was watching you in high school, and you feel this connection. And I think even with Heather, it's more, I think of her as a person like, who was a childhood friend who I'm doing kind of a favor for and helping her family and telling her story out there. So that's what my mentality. And I'm very lucky and happy to be doing it. And I think my producing partner, Nick Bailey, who's a friend of mine, kind of feels a little bit the same way. So that's really the driving force, and really to kind of get the truth out there because of all these rumors. We just want to at least be able to tell her story, because nothing out there ever tells her story. They just focus on the rumors and the poltergeist curse. And even when we were trying to fund this film and we're working as we were shopping it and everything, of course, the opportunities that came our way by any of certain executives or people that we knew just wanted to do the same thing with it. Like they kind of didn't want us to do it the way that we were doing it. They just were
The dark side of.
yeah, but the whole thing is, we got the family on board with us who were lovely people and they trust us. And we said from the start, we're going to do you guys justice and do Heather justice. And it's like, it's as tempting as it usually is when people are throwing things at you. This isn't about the money at all, at least for me and Nick, it's not. It's about telling her story and getting it out there. And whether it's seen by one person or millions, it just has to be done right.
I think the true Heather fans will really appreciate it.
Yeah, the hope, and they really show that what she is. We know the quote unquote salacious parts of her story is really the kind of getting to the death and getting to those things, and that's not really her story. And we really share a lot of things that have never been shared, and a perspective on her. And hopefully that when anyone watches this, they'll at least get an idea of who she was. And we can't stop these rumors going on, and they will still happen, but at least there's going to be something truthful out there.
Is it the family's or maybe I have to wait until the documentary comes out to find out, but is it the family's, stance that her death was preventable? And
Yeah. Oh, it's undisputed that it was like when I
yeah,
say, well, preventable in the fact that it could have been her condition, if detected before, could have been fixed with an easy surgery. And but it's like, but it's a hard, and of course, as a parent, why, love her mom so much. It's like, 'cause I'm a father as well, and it's like our biggest fear. And no matter what, even though we know it's not, she knows obviously it was not her fault, but you can't not feel like, it's like if you only did this, if you only did this, there was nothing. The minute Heather was ever sick with anything, she was taking her to the doctor. She was a
yeah,
really good mom, and it's just also Heather was not one to complain. That's been said quite a bit. You've even heard that in other things, that she was not a complainer. So I mean, we don't know if she was feeling sick the last month of her life, really, like, sick or whatever. We just, because I mean, there wasn't any, well, I mean, there's one thing that you'll find out in the documentary that I'm not going to spoil here, but it's
hmm,
like, there's like her friends, especially, it's not like they knew she was sick, but people don't realize that she was filming Poltergeist 3. Then they kind of went on a hiatus, and then she went to school for 7 consecutive months uninterrupted for seventh grade. So she went to, people will watch the Poltergeist 3 and they'll see her with those puffy cheeks. And of course, people will be like, oh, look at her. How do you not know that she's sick? Look at those cheeks. I mean, she does not look well. And it's kind of like, dude, she has the puffy cheeks because she was on medication because they knew she wasn't well, and that was treating her condition. She was taking prednisone, which is, I guess, like a steroid that you take when you have Crohn's disease. And when she was taking that medication, it did help. Like, it kind of took the pain away, but that really wasn't the issue. The issue was that she had a blocked, like, abnormal intestine that needed to be fixed. And then it's kind of like a ticking time bomb inside her body that was gonna explode, and it did. And that's the sad thing, that she died of septic shock, which means that, like, I guess a hole or something happened, and it went into her bloodstream, and that'll shut down your body. And it's like, so it's more that, like, from her friend's perspective, it's not like you kind of had this sickly person at school or anything like that. It's like, it was just all of a sudden she was at school on Friday and then dead on Monday. I think maybe it was a question you asked me, but not. It was a real shock. Like,
yeah.
it wasn't even like, I mean, everyone was in complete shock when they heard this. Yes, it was preventable, and that, of course, does not sit well with you and with anyone.
It's a hard pill to swallow. It's so, even as tragic as it is, it's so fortunate that you were able to access a lot of the medical records and things like that just because of what happened with the hospital and the parents and everything afterwards, because it completely dispels any of these rumors about Hollywood killing Heather. I'm glad it afforded you the opportunity to be able to see those actual documents so that we can just put an end to all of these rumors.
Yeah, or at least, I mean, of course, we can never put a full end to it because, everyone's going to have an answer. Everyone will say, oh, the stuff you saw was, Hollywood had it changed and they paid off the hospital. It's kind of like, please, I mean, as an attorney myself, I mean, it was a lawsuit that went on for about 6 years after she passed away. And it was a big fight because, of course, anytime you're fighting over a lot of money, even if the other person's 100% negligent, they're going to hire the big lawyers to bring that 100% down as far as they can. And so they're going to use whatever tactic they can to do that. If they can even bring it down from 100% to 90%, they've done their job. And I mean, I'm not a defense attorney. I'm a plaintiff attorney. It's like, you kind of know the tools the other side is going to fight. And I'm just telling you that they were fighting dirty with Heather and her mom. And they're trying to shift the blame. They're not denying that they misdiagnosed her, but they're kind of basically saying, well, it wasn't 100% our fault. It was also partially this person's fault or this person's fault, or, so, and that's their job. So, I mean, but it's to then put a family through that is really
It's
horrible. But it does allow us to have those documents because they had to produce all the medical everything. I saw the x-rays, I saw the blockage she had, and then I read all the depositions, and I just really feel for the family. And they're just lovely people. And also, it's just an interesting human thing. You think in general, like, how do you get through something like this? Like,
yeah.
how do you move forward? Because I mean, with her mom, it was one of those relationships where they were like attached at the hip. I mean, of course, most all mother daughters are close, but this is like one of those things where they're like very close. So it's like, how do you move forward? I just think her mom is such like a trailblazer, a tough, sweet woman. And it's like, to move forward. And I think just how you kind of get through things like this is you have to just mentally think that she was meant to be here for 12 years. That was what she was, kind of like, that was what her fate was, I guess. Or so it's like, that's, I think, with trauma and stuff, that's the only way you can kind of move forward.
I am curious to see more from her mom and just all of it. It's like the real human story of like how do you persevere after that kind of a loss, after that kind of a trauma. It's so sad.
And have it be so public, and then have it be so like,
Mm.
and then the years later, I mean, just general, let's say you had a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful relationship with your grandfather, let's say he was the nicest, coolest man in the world, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere someone's like, oh, your grandfather was a child molester, and you're just kind of like, what the f are you talking about? Or kind of making up something. It's like, do you defend it? It's like there's that part of you that wants to just punch him in the face, but then it's like there's a part of you that also doesn't want to give light to that, what someone is saying about amazing dead relative. I'm just saying, it's a real hard place to be in.
I do think it's a scary amount of people that are buying into this kind of content. That's an episode for another day. And the kind of like the psychology that goes behind it and why we opt into those things and like why society is using true crime and child abuse as a form of entertainment, how it's actually like hurting victims. So I think that, like I said, I'm excited to see the documentary and just kind of relive some of her best moments, but also see like a real human story of like, yeah, how do you get through that and doing it in the public eye? Do
And what
you
was it like going
guys?
to school with like Heather during this time? What was it like? 'Cause I'm sure we all had someone, I mean, we had a couple people growing up who passed away, one in high school, one very traumatic moments.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what is it like when something like that happens? So there is a human aspect to this that I think is very, powerful. There's a few interviews that we took that were not, because we've chose to not give a lot of attention to these rumors, because we did actually on camera interview one of the Rocky Road cast members, the one who people are alleging wrote this, and we're probably not going to air that, just only
Okay.
because the fact that it's like, it's not, this person had a wonderful experience on the set, and it's just like we shouldn't give much light to it. That's been
Yeah.
kind of the big.
So, like, I'm glad it exists. I'm glad it's on the record.
Yeah, it exists, and like, it's kind of, I mean, such wonderful people, and like, we even spoke with her tutor, her on-set tutor, or because most people don't realize that, most of these abuse that we ever do hear about with Hollywood, none of it really ever occurs on the set. It's usually kind of like, that people that they meet while they're filming, and then they either become, it's like it usually happens afterwards. Sets, even in the 80s, are, especially with children, are very protected. There's a studio teacher slash guardian that kind of is their job, is to make sure that they're not working certain hours, they're not abused, they're not that type of stuff. So that's why when you read even those rumors that we saw with what they said happened on like, a rotating group of little kids and like parading, on a stage for people who are, I don't know, touching themselves. I mean, that is such fiction. Nothing in Hollywood, maybe if you have a really small like budget thing being shot, nothing with Hollywood regulations is that happening. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm just telling you, and it's even in the 80s. I mean, like, so any of the abuse type stuff that happens usually is done offset.
And that's what we saw with Drake too, right? I
Well,
mean, he's going
exactly.
and spending the night at Brian's house. These
Yeah.
people ingratiate themselves in these children's lives and they, find people that don't have parents that are protecting them.
And that's usually where something like that occurs. Because I
Yeah,
mean,
a
it's not
100%.
happening on the set in front of a bunch of people and they're letting it happen. And like, it's even in the 80s. I mean, it's just, if you even know any of those things, even with Corey Feldman that he alleges all those things, I mean, nothing was happening like on the set in front of everyone. And that's even why, even when it goes back to Heather, is the fact that her mom was always there and she wasn't really hanging around much when she wasn't filming. It's not like, her mom was trying to, you have to go to this party and you got to go to this party. It was nothing like that. It was more like if her agent said you have to go to this award ceremony, so they'd come down, they'd go to the ceremony, then they'd drive back home.
Really just that she's prime for this type of story because she's a little sweet, innocent, and it's a blonde girl, and it's the fetish of the destruction of innocence, in my opinion.
Exactly. And that she died young, and that she died, technically while they were filming a movie, and the irony that it's a role she played, horror movie. So I mean, she's got all the ingredients, but the only
Mm-hmm.
the only thing missing are the facts.
The facts, exactly. There's no facts to back any of it up. And I'm so glad that you guys were able to interview the person that supposedly wrote this awful thing about her. And it's confirmed that it's not true. And this was never a thing that occurred. When can we expect the documentary to come out?
Well, we hope it's going to be later this year. I mean, as of now, it's going through the process of, it's going through the final stages, and it's like going to be submitted to certain festivals. And we hope to have it available for viewing by the end of the year. If I was, I mean, so it's one of those things where you can never really say, but I hope it's going to be sooner than later. So I really feel it's going to be this year, or at least like, there will be like more like little trailers or parts, or, we'll be able to get it out. I mean, I imagine that probably a streaming platform or someone will be interested around October time because of the Poltergeist stuff. But I think that that's probably the best timely time for someone to launch it.
I think that's so great. And I'm just so excited to see it. I'm happy and it's inspiring for me to see you do this project. I'm so glad that you reached out to me. I mean, my Aaron Carter project is kind of a pipe dream, but I hope it'll happen one day because I think it's important. And like you said, when you kind of like, you just want to give this person a voice who isn't there to speak for themselves anymore, it's a beautiful thing.
It's challenging as a producer too, where it's like, because if you find with Aaron, let's say you kind of go down that path and you start dealing with the family and dealing with everyone, and it's kind of when you start shopping it, it's kind of like if there's nothing quote unquote new to uncover, if let's say it is just what it is, that that's kind of, the sexiness is taken away from us. There's no bombshell that you're dropping. Of course, Quiet on the Set, their bombshell was they had, Drake. They had Drake sharing for the first time. That was their big, believe me, if they didn't have Drake sharing that, that thing does not get made. I'm 100%.
Right.
That Dan Schneider thing is not going to be purchased by anybody, but like in a strong way. It's one of those things where when you deal with something, even where you're not dropping a bomb, you're going to have to fight to keep it in its integrity. Because I'm sure anyone who would take that Aaron, let's say you did a real factual thing on Aaron, and let's say his last day, that where he passed away was really just an addiction thing, or just that it came out that way. And it's anyone who buys it is going to be teasing it like crazy.
Yeah.
But it's like, but I think that definitely you need to keep pushing at it. And people, they do love the truth. It may just take a little longer to get done.
And we know all of the things, that we just went over, of course, aren't true, but is there any surprises that we should expect?
Yeah, well, there's definitely stories that have never been shared. So of course, any of the hardcore Heather fans know some, but there are people who've never shared any story publicly about her. And yes, I mean, I hope definitely what we're releasing is something that's never been done before. If you're asking, or is there like a massive bombshell? I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, it's hard to say but I mean, that's why we get a lot of pressure to talk about the rumors and talk about this, that, and the other. It's because the thing that kind of, I mean, I could tell you that there were a couple people who actually had amazing memories of Heather, and for whatever reason or not, did not choose to give an interview, because my guess is likely a publicist or someone was kind of like, it's not a good idea for you to touch that.
It's connected to these rumors.
Yeah, or a rumor that has them unlawfully connected. And it makes me really sad. Like I was telling you, it's like the underbelly. And I get it, especially as a man, I get it. Someone's accusing you of something that I mean, it has no truth. And you had a wonderful memory of this person and great, and you'd love to be able to talk about her, but it's like you feel that it's going to do more harm than good.
That's so
like
sad.
it's accusation is a conviction a lot of times.
Yeah.
It's wonderful when people get called out for what horrible stuff they did, but then the ones that are not true, it really puts men in a really hard position. It's hard. I think we're still kind of learning how to deal with that. I mean, not just men, but just anyone like at a vulnerable place where
the low hanging fruit to go after people like Steven Spielberg and just like any type of like powerful man in Hollywood, because it's like, yeah, of course we're going to believe that. We know that this happens.
Yeah, or they'll find a photo of like, Heather. There's a lot of photos like Heather sitting on Steven's lap. Like Heather and Drew on Steven's lab. Yeah, just for a photo. Yeah. Then they'll have horrible things to say. I keep saying to anyone who ever emails us or tells us, like, well, just give me one piece of evidence, like just one thing, even if it's circumstantial. Like, and all they can come up with is, look at her face in this photo. You can see the fear. It's like, shut that.
And obviously, you guys had to explore the conspiracy of it a little bit because you had to reach out to Gabe and to Enty. And, I wonder if they were under the impression that the movie was going to be about, more conspiratorial driven, truly.
Yeah, we always were pretty upfront. We're never tricky. I mean, we've said we're telling Heather's story and we were just asking questions. And of course, it's always a sign when they don't want to be on camera or they don't want it. It's like, you kind of know in general. I mean, they don't want to talk to us. And with NT, it's kind of like, because they don't want to be put in this position where they're being asked something that I guess maybe they know they've either made up. It really was a great experience. And just there were those couple that, like, I feel in my heart that, like, like, they really wanted to either give an interview or something, but were advised not to.
Yeah, I can totally understand that and see that. That's heartbreaking and interesting. It's dangerous that anonymous content creators exist for a multitude of reasons. I think we pretty thoroughly covered that in this episode. And I'm just really glad that you were able to come on.
Yeah, no,
And
thank you. And of course, as time gets closer, we can maybe have more conversations. I mean, it's not like it's obvious the fact that NT was exposed within the last couple months or so. I mean, just the name, because we were always kind of wondering who that person was because we wanted to reach out to him. And it was more that I think, yeah, Gabe was kind of acting as a little bit of a like middleman. I mean, my interactions with Gabe were fine. Gabe was fine with us. Like, I mean, he's maybe a strange guy, but I mean, I never had a problem with him. Hearing a couple of those things when he had the conversations with NT, I kind of thought at times he was the voice of reason. Like he kind of was saying like, even in those banters that he was saying like, hey, this is probably not true. And NT was saying his things. Basically, NT was, dodging, understandably, because I mean, even if he didn't write them, he did publish them. So that would be an awkward conversation with the family, I'm sure.
right.
Yeah. So
I would think so.
yes, I mean, I'm happy. I'm a big believer in
And
kind of
and
every, like, what goes around comes around. So, I mean, I knew it would be a matter of time before, you would get, you can only do it so many times before your name will get out there, and you just gotta be held accountable for what you do. I mean, it's just a human thing. Even with Brian Peck and everything. I mean, it's like, yes, does he deserve to have a whole documentary coming out about him? Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, I haven't seen any. Has he even given a comment? I can't imagine he's even left his house.
Oh,
I
I'm sure
mean,
he's working
probably.
on the Nickelodeon set as we speak.
Yeah, well, even if he's working, I mean, I mean, it's believe me, I'm sure he's not loving life right now.
And that's a part of the problem. I think once you get to a certain point of being able to openly be an abuser like this, you don't have a bad day. You've already shoved it in society's face that you're going to do this. And who's going to stop you? No one's going to stop them from doing any of this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's also people do have egos though. So I mean, I think even if he's convinced himself that these are not true, and whatever he's convinced himself, he still has to go to Starbucks, and you now have the world thinking something about you, and I can't imagine that feels good.
Right.
He deserves it. It's interesting to me that as I saw Dan Schneider has come out a couple times. He's spoken, about this. So I mean, he's definitely made some views, and I just have yet to see Brian Peck say anything, because what could you possibly say? I mean, like,
No.
Drake's had some
No,
issues of his
yeah.
own too, like kind of like, so there are people who are somewhat against the documentary saying, well, Drake's an abuser himself, like, whatever they sit there and say. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
one thing that I was always taught when it comes to documentaries, a documentarian told me this, that like, documentaries are points of view. I mean, yes, 95% of the time they are truth, but you have to keep in your mind that the story is being told from the point of view of, the filmmaker, whoever it is. So it's kind of like you can't always take everything as
Right.
fact.
Because ideally you want it to be like a slice of life, right?
Yeah, documentaries are not like a CNN expose. Like they're not,
Mm-hmm.
it's not news. And I understand that when people are going to watch our documentary, and some people will sit there and think, hey, we're with I mean, I do my best to present things as they were. And, I think, but at the same time,
Yeah.
I don't have a bias. Heather's not a relative. She was the girl who was being the mediator when two girls were having a catty fight. When I'm reading notes that they're passing back and forth, and like, she's like, how come so-and-so is not being nice to me? Like, don't worry, I'm still your best friend. Like, she's just the normal kid that to, bestow this upon her memory is unfair.
It's insidious, and honestly, like I can't tell you how relieved I am to be done with this episode, only for the fact that it's heartbreaking and hard to read this stuff about her, about anybody at all, just about her body. And
What's more disturbing, reading it or the fact that someone actually wrote it?
yeah.
Wrote it knowing that it's not true. That's kind of disgusting. I mean, luckily the family is very well rounded. They kind of get it, and they're not, I mean, yes, it hurts, but it's not it they kind of understand that, these people who are doing this is garbage, and they know what the truth is. So it's like their niece, like Tammy's daughters, who are both wonderful people, they were a part of it too. They would, when this first started happening in 2017, they'd respond and say like, I'm, Heather's niece, and this is,
Right.
and then of course they'll get attacked, like kind of like, as people don't
Yeah.
want to hear, they don't want to hear the truth. They want to hear
Well,
like,
and it's one thing it's coming from somebody that's crazy. Okay, you can kind of dismiss it, but to have to understand that it's someone who's crazy and they're also profiting. They're doing this for money, and it's intentional, and there's research that went into it, and this wasn't some casual off the cuff conspiracy trap that somebody fell into. It's literally a well formulated story. And that's really sick.
I mean, there's everyone kind of has a line. I mean, when it comes to when I say the duty as a publisher, I mean, I think I heard that like with TMZ, like, you think that they're all sleazy. I know that TMZ will never out something. That's one thing that they will like. They have everyone's got their lines, but their line is that they will not, if they get a tip that someone is gay or something and they're not publicly out, they're not going to out them. And maybe there's other rules that TMZ has as well. There are certain lines that some places won't cross. So it's kind of like, I think that, talking about a dead child would be one line. I think that, talking about a dead child's corpse in a crypt would be off limits.
I think it's really a fetish, and I think that's like clear and evident if you look at all of NT's work as a collective. That's just my opinion, allegedly, conspiracy, whatever.
Oh, and like you said, pandering to a certain audience, a demographic that would reading stuff like that.
I think so, but like you said, like some of these didn't even get comments, or people were even ridiculing him in the comments. So it's like
Yeah, like kind of
you're
like enough about
really
Heather already. Yeah, there's some people say it's kind of like I think that not everyone's really jumping on board, but it seems that people jump on board about the narrative of her being abused by Hollywood, and that kind of that seems to stick. And there's not, and even when you talk to them, they don't really have much that they're basing it on.
I'm glad that we were able to dispel some of like the Hollywood killed Heather rhetoric that's out there and just get some insight on the documentary and the facts. And I'm so excited to see the documentary, and I'm excited for you to hopefully come back on the podcast soon, and maybe we can do like a movie review or something fun like that.
Yeah, no, definitely enjoy like all your 90s deep dives into films and stuff. So we can definitely come back and do something positive. It's all fun. So it's all good.
I always listen to your friend's podcast, The Odd Podcast, and it's
Yeah, the
with
Odd Podcast with Joe Parisi. That's his name. He's a good guy. He's funny. We're going to be doing another episode soon about either some film or something kind of cool coming up.
he
So
just did Swingers. You did a Clueless episode with him that I really highly recommend to everybody, like all of my nostalgia people. And I'll drop the link to when I post this episode so you guys can go find it.
yeah, it's funny. We try to share some. I've got some like Hollywood insight that I try to sprinkle in there if I have anything of any fun things to add in there. And
Oh, this is like the Clueless episode. I'm definitely underselling how good it is,
oh,
actually.
well, thanks. I think as you mean because of my personal connection with Clueless, like the
Yes.
fact that I went to Beverly Hills High School, and that's and in one of my classes, Amy Heckerling, the writer director, was sitting behind us taking notes. That was kind of fun.
It's such a fun episode to listen to, you guys. Do you want people to find you on social media?
I guess I'm not very active on it. What they can do, at least for now, you can follow the documentary is called She Was Here. That was for the Heather O'Rourke. And it's like if you go on Facebook, we do have a Facebook group. So that's where we're going to be posting a lot of updates and any fun things there. So if you guys want to follow that, yeah, following my personal stuff is not very exciting.
That's perfect. Thank you.
So, and of course, I'm sorry for everything that you went through. And it's like, I don't really have words for that, but it's not shocking to me.
And I do feel ashamed when I read through some of these things he wrote about her and things he wrote about other children and people. I'm just like horrified.
Anyone who chooses also to publish these things, it's tricky. He has an interesting business model that he put together, and kind of a way where he could really hide behind, like really put his hands up and be like, hey, this isn't me, like I'm just the messenger, like that type of thing. It's kind of like, as the law at this moment, like I mentioned before, doesn't have a lot of penalties for the messenger, so it's tricky.
No.
It's
And
tricky.
I hope it does give him pause before. Well, I know it won't, but I think it's just important to ring the bell on this and like make it be known that this is going on and it's not really a victimless crime.
Yeah, maybe someone will watch the documentary and maybe think twice about starting rumors or talking about people, or Heather realizing she was a person, and kind of think like, maybe I shouldn't write this.
Yeah, it's hurtful. Not wait for you to come back, and we will talk to you guys again soon. Later.